speak it fluently. It doesn't matter if it's German, any foreign language. If you want to speak it fluently, to use it freely, then this is the right webinar for you. Secondly, if you have tried several times to learn the language, but it never quite worked out, and you don't know why it is, you think like you've been trying to learn the language over and over again, and the fluency is just not there. Keep watching, because you will find out why this is it. Now, maybe you feel that you don't have a talent for languages. So many people think this is the problem. They don't have the talent. They don't have the language gene. I will tell you in this webinar why this is not the case. Maybe you don't know how to learn vocabulary effectively. This is one of the biggest problems for people. They don't know how to remember words long term. I will tell you about an amazing method which will help you learn any language really, really effectively and effortlessly. Maybe you don't have time to go to weekly language classes, and you would like to go to a language course, but maybe there's not one available, or you don't quite enjoy it, then this will be a nice alternative for you. And also, if you would like to learn a language in a fun way and enjoy it. I know that for many people this is completely new. It's like, is that even possible to learn a language and enjoy it? Well, I actually think this is the only way to learn a language, and I want to tell you about methods which will be fun and enjoyable for you. Before we start, let us go through a few tips on how to make the most of this webinar. First of all, I recommend that you turn off your phone or any other distractions that you have around you. Maybe close other tabs on your browser to make sure that you can enjoy this hour and a few minutes fully and get something from it. Also, I would recommend you watch this on a laptop or a PC, not your phone, not your tablet, because there might be some technical issues. We sometimes experience that, but usually when people watch with Google Chrome on their phone, on their PC or their laptop, then usually this works perfectly. And also, if you get an interesting idea or two in this webinar, I personally like to write it down, because then I know I will remember it later. So just grab a piece of paper and a pen, and if you hear something interesting, then feel free to write it down. And let me tell you that if you watch this webinar till the end, you are going to get a very special present from me, which will help you learn any language really, really effectively, even beyond the stuff that you learn in this webinar. So definitely keep watching, it's going to pay off. Now, who is speaking to you? Who is Lydia, who is talking right now? Let me introduce myself briefly. I am from Slovakia, and I am a polyglot. That means that I speak a few foreign languages, and I've learned them in the last 20 years of my life. These are the languages that I have learned in the order that I have learned them. And basically, I'm able to speak 7 of these foreign languages fluently, even though I learned them a long time ago. Those are English, German, Spanish, Polish, French, Esperanto, and Russian. The other 2 languages are Swahili and the Slovak Sign Language, which I spoke quite well at a certain time, but then I kind of lost it. And I want to tell you about how I learned these languages and how I'm able to keep 7 of them on a fluent level, because I know many people struggle with this. Once they learn a language, they are not able to keep it. Now, I used English and German also professionally as a conference interpreter. I worked in this way for 6 years, and I had the incredible honor to interpret some of the most interesting people I've ever met. There was a summit of 5 European presidents. I was the interpreter for Slovakia's first lady, also for Slovakia's former prime minister, and I think many of you will probably know Tony Robbins. I was the interpreter on one of his events for 8,000 people. It was absolutely incredible. So this was my way of using languages professionally. Besides that, for 10 years I worked as a language teacher. I taught various kinds of students, from primary school students to language classes in language schools, to university students when I was doing my PhD. So I had a lot of experience in teaching English and German as a foreign language. But then I decided to change the way I teach languages forever, and I turned myself into a language mentor. If you've never heard about this profession, it's because I kind of made it up. I started a project of language mentoring in order to help people not to learn a language, but to learn how they can learn a language by themselves. And I'm doing a lot of talks and seminars and online courses to help people with this. This is my main thing right now. I've been doing this I've been doing it for 4 years, and this is my incredible team that helps me help people learn languages. And maybe you have seen me somewhere either speaking at conferences, or maybe you have watched some of my talks on YouTube, or you stumbled upon my TED Talk, which I still can't quite believe it, but it hit more than 7 million views in about a year of being online. The first million was just in the first 5 days of being online. So I'm so happy to be able to share my message with so many people. It's about the secrets of learning a new language. If you haven't watched it, maybe you can watch it after this webinar. It's just 10 minutes long. And if you watch this webinar, you will actually understand what I'm saying in the TED Talk in a much more detail. So, let me now tell you about my path to learning the 9 languages. I'm going to tell you about 3 secrets that will help you learn any language. But first of all, I think it will be quite useful if you understand my journey, if you understand how I learned all this stuff about learning languages, because I didn't know about this when I started, and I had to learn it by trial and error. So, let me tell you about myself when I was 14 years old. I had a dream, I don't know why, but I always loved South America for some reason. And I really wanted to go there one day and to travel around those countries and talk to the people in their language. And of course, the most useful language in Latin America, South America, is Spanish. So when I was 14 years old, I decided I want to learn Spanish. Now, I knew of 4 possible ways of learning a language at that time. I thought, well, I could learn a language at school, right? This is the easiest, the cheapest way. If you're lucky and your school provides lessons of that language, then you can simply attend them and learn a language. Unfortunately, that was not my case. My school did not teach Spanish at all. The second way to learn a language, I thought at the time, was to attend a language class, to pay for, a language school, go to a lesson with a teacher, and learn in this way. Unfortunately, I was from a small town and we didn't have this opportunity either. The third way I could think about was to pack up my stuff and travel to South America and speak the language there, use it, learn it by living with the people. But I was 14 years old, so obviously this was not an option. So the last thing I thought of was I could try and learn the language by myself, use some books, be at home and read from those books and maybe learn a language in this way. I wanted to try it because I really wanted to go to Latin America. So that was my first attempt to learn Spanish. I got a book for autodidacts. This is the book. It's called Španělčina in Slovak, that means Spanish. You probably guessed that. And I remember being in the bookstore and I had an option of buying just the book or buying the book together with the audio recordings, a cassette, a tape at that time. And I decided to just get the book. I guess I was saving money, or I thought I wouldn't need it. I would say, well, I have the book, I will learn the language from it. And boy, was that a wrong decision. I only realized it later. But anyway, I got the book and I started going through it chapter by chapter. I actually quite liked it. I would read the text and go through the grammar explanation and then do all the exercises. It's a typical book on how to learn a language. So I was going through it and it took me about 2 months or 3 months and I was actually feeling pretty good about it. I was like, yeah, I'm kind of getting the gist of Spanish. I can use it, I can understand some texts, so it was fun. And then one day, a friend of my parents came to our house and he saw me with that book. He saw that I was learning Spanish and he spoke Spanish. So he wanted me to practice with him and he asked me questions like, hey, say something in Spanish, tell me how you're doing. And for me, this was the first opportunity ever to use Spanish with another person. I was just learning by myself with a book, and now there was another person that I could have a conversation with, right? So I was super excited. And I looked at the book in my hands and I said, tengo un libro rollo. Now, this is exactly how I said it, okay? Tengo un libro rollo. And the guy was like, wait, what do you mean, rollo? That's not a word in Spanish. I said, what do you mean? Rollo means red. I have a red book. That's what I said. And the guy started laughing. He's like, oh, no, you got that wrong. That's not the way it's pronounced. It's pronounced rojo. right? Because all the J letters in Spanish are pronounced h. It's jota. It's like that's not a y sound, just like you would pronounce it in Slovak. You got this one wrong. And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? All the J's are pronounced h? Like that's really weird. I mean, all the words that I've learned so far, and a lot of them had jota, this J letter in them, like viejo or let me see, trabajar, and I just learned them wrong. When I realized that, it was like, no way, this totally stopped me from learning the language any further, because I realized I'd been doing it all wrong. And I was thinking, who knows what else I've learned in a wrong way? There's no way for me to find out. The only way is to go through all those texts again and maybe watch. I didn't know even how to find out what I learned wrong, because I was there by myself. I didn't know how to do it. So I was absolutely desperate. And I remember that day. It was seriously the last day that I worked with this book, and I was quite disappointed, especially because my dream of traveling in South America seemed very far away, and I was like, okay, then this is probably not the right way for me to learn the language. And yeah, well, it didn't work out. Let's forget about that. So I stopped learning Spanish until my second attempt to do it, and it was when I was about 19, 5 years later. I moved to Bratislava to study at a university, and so I had more opportunities to learn a language, and I used one of them, a language course. So I signed up for a course with other people, and I came to the lesson really excited because I was going to learn Spanish this way. But to be honest, I was very disappointed even after the first class, because there were 25 people in the room, and the teacher wasn't really motivated to learn us, to teach us. She was not really excited about teaching us, so it didn't quite work out. And also we were using the same book that I had used before that, so we were basically going through the same chapters that I had gone through myself. And I realized this is not the way for me to learn Spanish. It just didn't work out again. It was another failed attempt. It took me about 4 months to try it with this course. I didn't get anywhere, and I thought, okay, this is useless. This is not going to work. And I felt pretty sad, because this dream had been with me for many years, since childhood, and now I realized I'm probably not going to travel in South America. I mean, of course, I can travel one day and maybe use English to get by, but I really wanted to, communicate with the people in their language, and I don't know, I was just really, really disappointed. Until one day, I got an idea. I remember this was Christmas, and I don't know why, I just realized, well, what if I tried learning Spanish in a fun way, but not in order to, learn it well and to know all the grammar rules and to be perfect, and just enjoy working with Spanish in some way. And I don't know how I got that idea, but I just thought, well, maybe I could read Harry Potter and the Spanish translation of Harry Potter, Y la Cámara Secreta. This is the second part of the series, and maybe I could, read the book and also listen to it at the same time. I got the audiobook of this same Harry Potter, and I got the Spanish translation of the Harry Potter book, and I decided to spend every day reading a few pages and also listening at the same time. In this way, I wanted to make sure that I get the pronunciation right, that I wouldn't say something like rollo instead of rojo. So this was my way of kind of playing around with Spanish. Just enjoy the sound of it, enjoy the text, and try to decipher the text, try to figure out what is happening in the book. Now, I chose Harry Potter because I had known the book really, really well. This was my favorite book when I was a child. I read it several times in Slovak before, so it was easier for me to follow a text in Spanish, even though I was actually a beginner. But I knew what would happen in each chapter. So now that I saw it in Spanish, I was kind of guessing, oh my god, is this what is actually happening? Maybe sometimes I would check in the Slovak translation of Harry Potter, like, oh yeah, this is the situation where, Ron says that and Hermione responds that. So it was actually interesting for me just to go through this new version of Harry Potter. And I would spend 20 to 30 minutes with it every day before going to sleep. I would just read the text and listen to it at the same time, and it was just amazing what happened. I remember the first pages. It was very difficult for me to understand stuff. I just understood words like, the names like Harry, Hermione, Dumbledore. And then later on, the text started to make more and more sense. And I would understand sentences, and then little chunks and paragraphs. And by the end of the book, I started to understand whole pages. And I just couldn't understand it. It was incredible for me. It was like there is this mist, and it is being lifted because I suddenly understand more and more from the book just by reading and listening to it. It was really incredible, and I felt super happy about it. So that was my learning plan. Now that I tried it and I knew it worked, I decided to do it regularly. And I would read and listen to Harry Potter for 20-30 minutes daily, and then other books after I finished Harry Potter. And also, I would be working with grammar notes in that Teach Yourself book that I showed you. I would spend 10-15 minutes with it because I realized that it actually helps me understand Harry Potter better. Because there, in text in a book, you see the words used in grammar, in use, in practice. And I didn't know the rules how to apply grammar, so I wanted to learn about them by reading grammar notes. And this was my learning plan, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I spent several weeks going through this book and then other books, and I would work with grammar notes, and I kept improving my Spanish. I started to understand it actually quite well, and I was really, really excited about it. And then, one day, I remember I went to visit a friend of mine, and she introduced me to another friend of hers. There was a group of students, and one of them was a guy from Spain, a student who was studying in Bratislava in an exchange program, Erasmus, if any of you know about this program. And my friend Mirka was like, "Oh, Juan, come here, Lydia here is learning Spanish. You should totally talk to her, go and practice." She was excited because she gave me an opportunity to practice. Now, I was a bit worried because this situation happened in the past and I didn't do quite well in that situation, if you remember. And now this guy, this Juan, was actually very friendly. He was excited. He's like, "Oh, hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué tal? ¿Dónde has aprendido el español?" And he started to speak. He wanted me to make conversation. And you know what happened? I got stuck again. I realized that I actually understand this guy. He was speaking quite fast and, saying other stuff, and I could understand him, but I wasn't able to say much myself. I would say words, I would say some phrases, but I realized that actually I cannot speak the language. I can just understand it. So our conversation was half English, half Spanish. He spoke in Spanish. I understood almost everything, but I would reply in English because I just didn't have the ability to express myself in Spanish. And that made me wonder, okay, but how about speaking? What have I done in my language learning to improve my speaking? And the answer is nothing at all. So I realized that if I want to be able to speak Spanish, I should probably practice speaking, right? It shouldn't just be listening and reading and grammar. I should probably focus on speaking too. Now, my friend turned out to be very useful in contacting me with other people. So, by the way, this is me when I was 18 years old. This is Mirka, a good friend of mine. And this is Gabi from Mexico, who was also studying in Bratislava. And she was really excited about improving her English. So, Mirka got us together and she said, "Well, why don't you practice? Gabi can teach you Spanish and you can teach her English." I was like, "That's actually an excellent idea. We don't need to pay for the lessons. It's going to be an exchange, a tandem. And we can practice in this way." So I updated my learning plan. I didn't just read and listen to Harry Potter and other books. I didn't just do grammar in a Teach Yourself book. I would also speak to my Mexican friend for about 2 hours weekly. We had a regular schedule where we would meet twice a week. We would do an hour in English, an hour in Spanish, and this was the way for me to practice my Spanish. And it worked amazingly. We actually became friends with Gabi, and we started to spend more and more time together, like doing some shopping and just going to a cafe or for a walk. And I realized that I was improving my Spanish every week. But I didn't know how much I've improved until something happened. One day, we were supposed to meet, Mirka, Gabi, and me, in a cafe. And Mirka and I were there, but Gabi was late. She came a few minutes late, and I could tell from the first moment that something had happened. Something was wrong. She looked like she'd been crying. She was all shaken up, all nervous, and I asked her, like, "Oh my God, Gabi, what happened?" And she started speaking really, really fast, and she was really excited and shaken up. And she told us that there had been almost an accident 5 minutes ago, and she was almost run over by a car, and there was another lady, and she jumped away in the last moment, and the driver, put on the brakes, and there was a screeching sound, and fortunately nothing happened, but Gabby was just really, really shaken up from this experience. She was under flow of emotions. So our conversation was really fast, and I was asking her questions in Spanish, like, are you okay? Did anything happen? Did you call an ambulance? What happened? And she would tell me all about this, and for a few minutes we just exchanged information in a really, really fast way. And Mirka was sitting there listening to us, and she didn't speak Spanish, so I translated to her afterwards. And after a few minutes we realized everything is okay, nothing happened. It was just a shock, something unexpected, but we calmed Gabby down, and everything was okay. But then Mirka was looking at me in a weird way, and she was like, wait, Lydia, did you just have that conversation in fluent Spanish? Like, did you understand Gabby? She was speaking so fast. How could you understand it? And I saw you answering really fast, and you had a conversation. Like, how's that possible? I thought you said you'd been learning Spanish for, half a year? And at that moment, I realized, what, Mirka? You're right. Actually, I didn't realize it, but I actually did have a conversation in fluent Spanish right now, and it worked perfectly well. I actually used grammatically correct sentences. I was able to react to her questions and ask her questions. And oh my God, you're right. I actually did learn Spanish in half a year. This was a eureka moment for me because I did not realize it before then. I was like, okay, actually, yeah, I did learn Spanish in half a year. And how did I do it? So now that I started thinking about it, I realized there are actually a few things that I did, and I thought those are the reasons why I learned a language, and let me share that with you now. The first one is having fun. I realized that I enjoyed learning Spanish because it was really fun for me. I mean, I kept reading Harry Potter. That was my favorite book when I was a child, so why wouldn't I enjoy it? Even though I didn't understand it really well at the beginning, the fact that I loved the book so much helped me go through the text for 20-30 minutes a day and actually enjoy it. And in this way, I was learning more and more vocabulary. The phrases were repeating. I understood the context, so I started to decipher words, and it was an incredible fun experience for me to work with this book. So fun was definitely the number one ingredient in my language learning. The second thing I realized that worked really well was I had a lot of contact with the language. I spent a lot of time with Spanish. I mean, if you count all the minutes that I spent reading and listening to Harry Potter, and then later speaking to Gabby and going through grammar exercises, it was about an hour every day. So for half a year, I spent an hour working on my Spanish. The third thing I realized that worked really well was methods. I used very effective methods to learn Spanish. First of all, I read and listened to a book at the same time, which was very useful because you don't just see the words written, you also hear them. So you hear the natural intonation of the speaker, and you assimilate the language in a more natural way. Besides that, I also worked through grammar exercises, and I realized this was an incredibly useful thing because it helped me understand Spanish much faster than if I were just reading the book. And also, I spoke with Gabby the moment I realized that I actually need to practice speaking if I want to be able to speak the language. I started to practice speaking massively, and it helped me so much that in half a year I was able to have a very fluent conversation in a stressed situation. And finally, I realized what also helped me incredibly was having a system in my learning. That means that I created a learning plan, which I showed you. I decided to work with Harry Potter every day for 20 or 30 minutes. There were some days where I didn't quite feel like it, but because I had the plan, I did it every day. It became a habit for me, and this was extremely useful. I decided to speak to Gabby every day, every week, at least twice, and that also enabled me to practice the language regularly and get a lot of contact with it. So these were basically the 4 pieces of the puzzle that got in place for me when I realized what actually helped me to learn Spanish. And it was having fun, having a lot of contact with the language, using effective methods, and having a system, a plan that made sure that I wouldn't just stop learning because I didn't feel like it. And you know what's really best about this story? I did get to South America, and actually not just once. I traveled for a month in Argentina and Chile. I spent about 2 months in Mexico. I spent about 2 weeks in Cuba. I backpacked in Colombia for a month. I visited Spain several times because it's in Europe, it's close to me. And of course, I also visited Machu Picchu in Peru. And, well, if you look at the pictures, you probably see something in common. I have a travel scarf that I like to travel with and take pictures everywhere I go. For me, this was a dream come true. I mean, I love traveling. It's part of my lifestyle. And if I can use the language with the local people and actually talk to anyone I want, the experience of traveling is so much richer. It's incredible. And for me, learning Spanish actually enabled me to fulfill this old dream of mine, being able to travel and use the language. And this was not just with Spanish. I did the same thing with Russian a few years later. And I traveled on the Trans-Siberian Express using just Russian for 2 weeks and just talking to people in Russian, and it was an incredible experience too. So this is it. This is actually these are the 4 pillars that enabled me to learn Spanish and then any other language basically by having fun, a lot of contact with the language, using effective methods, and having a system. And this basically meant success for me with every other language I learned. After Spanish, I did the same with Polish. I learned the Slovak Sign Language. I learned French totally by myself, Esperanto. I learned Russian and Swahili. All of these languages I taught myself using the methods that I told you about, or using the principles and varying the methods to make sure that I always enjoy them. And now that you know my story, I want to share my 3 secrets with you to help you learn any language by yourself. It has taken me a few years to figure these things out by myself, by trials and errors. But now I'm really happy to share it with you so that you can have a shortcut in your language learning and you don't have to figure these things out by yourself. My first secret answers the question, how can I learn a foreign language within 2 years, even if I have a full-time job? I know that language learning sounds like a never-ending story and it takes a lot of time, but there are a few things I want to tell you which will definitely help you shorten that. But first of all, I have a nice metaphor which explains what language learning really is. Imagine it like getting off an island. Have you seen the movie Cast Away with Tom Hanks? I love this movie. It's about a guy who is basically left stranded on an island and he wants to get away. But there is a huge problem. He builds a little raft and he tries to get away from the island, but there's always this one big wave which kind of drags him back towards the island and he can never make it. And this is a beautiful metaphor for how language learning actually works. When we are learning a language, we are on an island. And we are trying to get away from it, right? So we take our raft, a little boat, and we start rowing. And we go across these little waves, one after another, until we get to this area here. These are the big waves. And until we cross those waves, we always have to keep rowing, because if we stop for a minute, we will be dragged back towards the island. And this is exactly what happens to people. Many people are learning a language for many years. And they are trying a little bit, and then they stop learning for a month, 2, 6 months, a year, and then they feel like a beginner again. Why? Because the waves dragged him back towards the island. So then they start learning again. They are a beginner, they are lower intermediate, and then again they stop learning. They don't make it to the fluency level across this last wave, and that's why they are dragged back towards the island. The goal in language learning should be to get over this last wave, and this is really important. Now, this wave is basically a comfortable fluency level where you can use the language freely in conversation, you can understand everything, you don't have a problem reading a book in that language, and this is the level that I always strive for in all my languages. And now, the answer to the question, how is it possible that I can keep 7 languages at a fluent level? The answer is simple. I have crossed this last wave. And this is exactly what you need to do if you want to succeed in your language learning. And if you haven't, and if you feel like you're trying over and over again, That's because you haven't crossed that last wave. For those who know the European framework system, this is the B2 level, a level of comfortable fluency where you can use the language freely. Another thing I want to explain to you is about learning a language in a school way and a natural way, which is definitely not the same. Imagine that when you're learning a language, you have a blank sheet of paper and your goal is to color it blue. This means that you don't know anything from the language, it's all blank, and this means that you know all the words because all the blue dots on the paper are the words and grammar that you know in that language, so you speak it perfectly, right? Now, how does that work? In the school system of learning languages, we usually cut the paper into little squares and then we start learning one little square, right? So these are the present tenses, or these are some basic words like animals in the language. And we learn them really well, and so we color this piece of the language really well. When we have that, we move on to the next one and we keep coloring another one and another one. And so after a few, let's say maybe 2 years of learning a language, this is the piece, the part of the paper that you have colored so far. And you know these things pretty well. You can maybe even say all the irregular verbs in the language. Maybe you know all the furniture, all the animals, all the colors and whatnot in the language, but all of this part of the language is totally unknown to you. You have never even seen one word or ever heard more complex grammar than the ones that you covered in your textbook. Sound similar or familiar? Well, I believe this is the way that the school system works. Now, in contrast, there is another way of learning a language, and this is for me a very natural way, a way that polyglots use. First of all, you start making dots on the paper. And they are all over the paper. They are from all areas of vocabulary and grammar. Then, in the second step, you start making more sense of phrases and sentences, and you start making these dots a bit bigger, right? And then you keep coloring the paper here and there, you know, with a few phrases here and a few phrases there, until the paper becomes more blue than white. And this is the level where we know the language and we can use it freely. And this is actually what happened to me when I was reading that Harry Potter book, right? At the beginning, I just understood a few random words, mostly names, as I said, like Harry, Dumbledore, Hogwarts. But then things started to make more sense, and I would say like, oh, I understand this phrase, I know what they said. And then I would say like, oh, I understand whole paragraphs and whole sentences. Until I got to the very end of the book where I could understand everything without any problems. That's an amazing way to learn a language, isn't it? And when you compare it to the school system, you get a lot of answers to your questions, as in why it hasn't worked for you learning a language in this way. 2 years of learning a language in a school way will leave you knowing a few things in the language really well. You know, maybe all the present tenses, past tenses, irregular verbs, but none of the other stuff in the language. Whereas, if you learn in a natural way, you discover the language, you use fun methods, and you basically decipher the language word by word, phrase by phrase. This is what you end up having after the same amount of time. A bit of here, a bit of there. You still have some white spots all over the paper, you know, in the whole language, but you can get by. You don't need to worry about not knowing anything from this whole other area of the language. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I spent a lot of time trying to explain this in the most clear way, and I hope this makes sense to you as well. So, if we get back to the first secret about how to learn a language within 2 years, basically we covered it in my story when I told you about the 4 pillars of language learning. You need to make sure that you learn in a fun way. You have a lot of contact with the language. 2 lessons a week in a group class of 10 people is definitely not enough. You need to spend more time with the language by yourself, using effective methods and having a system in place that will make sure you don't stop after the first week. All you need to do is make sure you cross the last wave. So this journey here, that is some hard work, right? Let us be clear about that. It will not happen overnight. It will not happen with 5 minutes of Duolingo, you know. It requires some more work. But once you get over that last wave, you will see what an amazing feeling that is, because you can finally use the language. And the best thing is, if you're here and you stop rowing, meaning you don't use the language for half a year or a year or even 2, nothing happens because you cross that wave. You will not lose that language. Maybe it will be a little inactive, but you can activate it very quickly. And from then on, you can enjoy the language in your life. And finally, we also explained why learning the language naturally by discovering things, maybe using a book like Harry Potter to read and to discover the language, why it is much more effective than trying to learn in the strictly school method of learning languages that we all know about. Now, my second secret is about some effective methods. I want to go into practice here and to tell you 3 very practical methods that you can really start using right away, and they are completely free of charge. My first method is for learning vocabulary. I want to introduce you to Emma, who used to memorize words, and it didn't work at all. I knew Emma when she was in her final year at school, and I talked to her teacher, her English teacher. She's a Slovak girl. I talked to her English teacher, and she said, well, Emma is a really nice girl, but she is really bad at English. She's the worst in her class, and Emma knew this. She knew that she was really not good at it, and she said, I'm trying my best, but it just doesn't work. And then I told Emma about the gold list method, and everything changed for her. She started to learn vocabulary every day. It became her #1 hobby. She spent 2 months working really hard on her English, and then when she got back to school in September, her teacher and classmates couldn't believe what she has done in just 2 months. She improved her English so much that she soon became one of the best students in class, and today she actually studies languages to become a translator and interpreter. It's an incredible story. Now, what she did was use the gold list method to learn vocabulary using a simple notebook like the one you see here and writing down lists of words translated into her language. Now, the gold list method was developed by David James, a well-known polyglot, a good friend of mine, who basically found out that if you write a list of 20 words and then you don't do anything with these words for 14 days, for 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks you rewrite them on the other side of the paper and you leave out the words which you actually remember, you will find out that, this is interesting, I only have to rewrite 70% of the words because 30% of the words are the ones that I have remembered very naturally without trying to memorize anything. I know that this sounds really weird for the people who hear it for the first time, and everybody goes like, wait, but what? What do you mean? Like you just rewrite words and you remember them without learning? But yes, this is exactly how the gold list method works. And then after 2 weeks, you rewrite this list over here, and you also realize that you have remembered 30%, and then you rewrite it here, and the same thing happens. It's an incredible method, which basically means you spend time writing into your notepad, somewhere like on a balcony, like I like doing, using nice colorful pens and enjoying your time with the vocabulary, and the learning happens in your mind subconsciously. I know it sounds incredible, but believe me, this works perfectly. There is quite a simple explanation to this, but we cannot go into detail, so I created an ebook which explains in detail how this works, what we do on day 1, and then what we do in 2 weeks, and what we do in the meantime with other lists in the notebook, because it doesn't mean that we just learn the language every 2 weeks, we learn every day, but we always distill after a certain time. And now we get to the point where I tell you what the present from this webinar will be, and you have probably guessed it. It's the ebook that we have written about the gold list method, and I'm absolutely sure that it will help you start learning vocabulary in a very, very different way from what you've tried so far. So, if you watch this webinar till the end, I will tell you where you will get the free ebook that you will receive as a gift from me for watching this webinar. Sounds like a good deal? I hope it is. This method is really awesome. If you just read this ebook and start applying it right away, you can get a notebook and start writing words. You will see how amazingly it works. I really, really love it. I've used it for 3 languages, and thousands of people that I told about that I told about this method are using it too, and they really love it too. Now, my method number 2 is about speaking. This is Maria, another friend of mine. She's from Greece. And one day she decided that she wants to learn the language of the Basque country. I don't know if you know where this is. This is basically in the north of Spain. It's a small region which has their own language, and it's very different from Spanish or any of the languages around the area. Maria really wanted to learn this language, and she didn't have a lot of materials and a lot of people to practice with. So she decided to practice speaking by herself. She basically spoke to herself every day about like what she's going to do, and just basically practicing speaking without having any other native speaker to speak to. And just imagine that she got invited into the Basque radio because people got excited about the fact that she was learning their language, the language of this small region. And she had her first talk with a native speaker in this language on that live radio show. Can you imagine that? I mean, I remember my first conversation when I was learning Spanish that I told you about, that one sentence that basically stopped me from learning Spanish for another 5 years. Then another first conversation with that Spanish student where I realized, oh my God, I cannot really speak the language. I understand, but I cannot speak. And Maria had her first conversation with a native speaker on a live radio show after learning the language for just 10 months by herself. It's an incredible story, isn't it? I really love this story because it shows that self-talk, the method that I want to tell you about, is actually really, really effective. What it means is you talk to yourself. And I know, again, that it sounds weird or maybe too simple, too good to be true, but believe me, this is an incredible method and it works. Now, how does it work? You can talk to yourself any time of the day when you are doing something like driving your car or, cooking dinner, doing some laundry, or just waiting for someone, just sitting down and spend 10 minutes, maybe not more, just 5, 10 or 15 minutes talking to yourself. And maybe you're asking yourself, okay, but what do I talk about? Like, what do I do? I have a few ideas for you. You can tell yourself the plans that you have for today or this weekend or next month. You can tell yourself about a TV series, like summarize what the last episode was about and what you think will happen in the next one. You can give an opinion on a current issue, something that is happening around the world and you want to comment on it, and basically tell a friend who might be interested in that. You can take a phone, look at a picture that you took last week and describe the picture to someone. Say what the situation was like, who was there, why they were there. You can comment on your horoscope for yesterday. You can have a look what people predicted would happen to you, and you can compare what actually happened to what people thought in that horoscope. There are so many opportunities to talk to yourself, but the most important thing is you have to start speaking. Just like I realized when learning Spanish that I need to practice speaking if I want to speak well, not just understand the language, you also need to start speaking if you want to speak the language well. There is no way around it. But this way is actually very nice. You don't need to find any native speaker, you don't need to pay anyone, you can just start doing it. And believe me, even if it sounds weird, and even if you feel weird at the beginning, if you do this every day for at least 10 minutes, you will notice a difference. And it doesn't matter what level of the language you're at. This is the best thing. So self-talk is definitely an amazing method. I totally recommend it to you. And please start doing it if you like the idea. Just start doing it right after this webinar. Just spend 10 minutes talking to yourself. My method number 3 is about reading. I love reading. I am a big book fan. And I told you about the way I read Harry Potter. Now, this may not be the best choice of a book for people who don't really love the story and who are not the biggest Harry Potter fans like I was, because this was actually quite difficult. I mean, it would be difficult for people who don't know the story. I chose this book because I knew it so well. I basically remembered a lot of what will happen because I read it in Slovak many, many times. Now, maybe you have a book like that, but maybe you don't. So I want to give you a tip. If you want to start reading a book in your language, in the language that you're learning, and you don't have a book which you would know almost by heart or which you would have read many times before, it's basically about using bilingual books. And if you don't know this, these are books that are written in one language on the left side and in another language on the right. So maybe you read in Spanish and you read the translation into English on the right page of the book. But even if you don't have these books, you can easily create them by yourself. It's very simple. You get a translation of a book, for example, the one by Stieg Larsson that I read in Spanish, and you get the translation or the original book written in a language which you understand really well. You open both books at the same time and you read a sentence in your target language and you check in the language which you understand. It's really, really simple. You don't need to worry about anything because if you don't understand, you always have the translation. You can simply look it up and you will understand what is going on. For me, this was extremely useful when I was reading other books after Harry Potter, for example this one, or even when I was reading in Polish. In the picture you can see the Polish and the Slovak translation of John Grisham's Fern, the book, maybe you've read it. And so that's exactly what I did. I was learning Polish for just 2 months when I started reading my first book, and I opened both of them and used the Slovak translation as a help, as an aid in reading the Polish book. It's really, really simple. All you need is 2 books from the same author, of course the same book, translated into 2 languages. You can easily get them on Amazon and start reading the moment they arrive. Pretty simple, right? So the second secret was about 3 particular methods, so let us just briefly revise. The gold list method is used for learning vocabulary, and don't forget, all you need to do is watch this webinar till the end and you will get the ebook Gold List Method in a nutshell for free from me as a gift. You can talk to yourself, use the self-talk method, which is very popular with many polyglots and works really well. It doesn't cost you a dime. Or you can start reading books. If you don't have a bilingual edition of a book, you can easily create a bilingual book by having a translation of the book readily at hand when you are reading the original book or the book in the target language. These are really effective methods, and I strongly recommend that you start using them because you will see how effective they are. Now, my third secret. I know that for many people the greatest problem is actually keeping their motivation high. They keep giving up over and over again. They keep getting back towards the island, just like we said in the metaphor. And I want to give you 4 very simple steps that will definitely help you improve your motivation, because this is really important when you want to learn a language well. The first is you need to make a decision. No one has ever learned a language by thinking, I might learn it one day, or maybe I'll do some reading tomorrow if I feel like it. It doesn't work like this. You need to decide if you want to start spending some time with your language. But the great thing is you can do it in a fun way. It doesn't need to be any super hard work. You just need to figure out a few fun ways to do it, but it all starts with a decision. I have a nice quote here. The best time to start learning a language was when you were a kid. The second best time is today. Don't beat yourself up for not having learned that language yet. Even if your spouse is from another country, or you're living in the country where the language is spoken, or you would just really, really, really want to learn that language or speak it and you still haven't. It's never too late. I know people who started learning a language well in their 60s and 70s, and they're doing just fine. So if you make a decision, that's when it all starts. If you don't make the decision, then nothing will ever help you. Not the best methods, not the best tips from me. The second simple step is pick 2 or 3 methods that you like. If you think this is too much, just pick 1. I told you about reading Harry Potter as a bilingual book. We mentioned watching TV series. You can create your own flashcards to learn vocabulary. You can talk to yourself. You can use the gold list method to start learning vocabulary. You can learn grammar from grammar books and do exercises. There are so many ways that you can work with a language and improve it, that all you need to do is to pick 1. If you don't know about any methods, just pick from one of the 3 that I mentioned in this webinar and you'll be just fine. The third step is you create a simple plan. I told you about the plan that I used for learning Spanish. It was my first attempt at learning a language by myself. It was a very simple plan, but it worked really well. The thing is, if you don't have a plan, you will most probably feel tired one day, or you will tell yourself, oh, you know what, maybe today is not the best day to speak to my Mexican friend. I will do it another day. No, if I already have it as a thing in my calendar, it will happen whether I feel like it or not. And that's the only way how to actually achieve results in language learning. Time is not something that you can have. Time is something that you create. It's all about priorities. So if you think that you don't have the time for learning a language, it's because you haven't made that time in your calendar. If you have a plan, if you put stuff in your daily schedule, daily calendar, it will be much easier. And finally, one advice I can give you is start tracking your learning progress. You can use any way you like. You can use an Excel sheet, you can just put a few squares on a piece of paper, create your own calendar, put it in your diary, it doesn't matter. Just start tracking your learning. You will see how motivating it is. And if you put it down, even if it's just 15 minutes a day that you spend learning, once you have a look at that calendar, you will feel super motivated to not give up. I like the quote by T. Harv Eker, who said, "What you track increases." This is absolutely true for any area of our life. I mean, it's true for tracking our finances, it's true for, losing weight, reading books. I personally like to track the time, my working time, and that has increased my productivity too. So I know that tracking, also with your learning progress, helps incredibly. So this is the third secret. How to make sure that I don't keep giving up, that I feel motivated to learn. It's pretty simple. Make a decision, pick a few methods, even one method is better than nothing. Create a simple plan and start tracking your learning progress. That's all you need to do, and I can guarantee you that your language learning will be very different from what you have experienced so far. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, Lydia, this actually sounds pretty logical, natural, it makes sense. I hope it does. I hope I was clear in my webinar. But maybe you're also thinking, I want to start learning the language and I want to, start doing all these things, but maybe I would need some help on that journey. Maybe it would be more fun to actually row towards that last wave if there are other people in the boat and everybody keeps rowing for themselves. If you feel like this, then now at the end of the webinar, I want to briefly tell you about online courses which I have, which I think would incredibly help you in your language learning, because they offer very practical help, something that is beyond this webinar that I can deliver within 1 hour. So if you just bear with me for a few more minutes, I would like to tell you about it, okay? Now, I've put my complete know-how for learning a language into 2 video courses. The first one is called Language Key, it's for complete beginners, and the second one is called Language Master, and it's for those who want to master a language on a fluency level, for those who already have a basis in a language and want to go on and get over that last wave. How does that work? It's actually a very easy to follow guide to learn any language. You will watch the videos in 9 modules, you will pick the methods that you like. In this webinar, we covered briefly 3 of the methods. In the video courses, I offer more than 30. You will create your learning plan based on my recommendations. You will follow the steps one by one, exactly as I explained to you in the video course. And then you basically just start learning in a new, fun way. You will know exactly what to do, what to pick, how to create your plan, and how to keep it. So language learning will be a lot easier. There is a detailed worksheet that goes with the video course, and you can decide whether you want to print it, like the picture on the left, or you just fill it in a digital form. It's totally up to you. I personally like to write on paper, so that's why there is also a printable version, but you can easily take notes by using the Word document that is available in the courses. Now, I really believe in the power of online education and online courses, because you can learn from the comfort of your home. You don't need to go to any live seminar. You learn when it suits you. You basically get lifetime access to the videos. So even if you don't want to learn the language right now, you can get the access a few minutes after this webinar, and you can watch the videos anytime you want. You can watch them repeatedly. You can get back to the videos 1 year from now when you apply to another language. It can provide education for your whole family. All the people who are living with you together in the household can use it to learn any language. So you can use it for Spanish, your spouse can learn it for French, your children can use it to improve their English, whatever it is, it's really suitable for any language. If you have any questions, you can easily ask me below the videos. There is a chat that you can easily